Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Careers. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, the FP&A Evolution, Benchmarks, Challenges, Empowerment. I would like to thank our webinar partner, Centage, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. The FP&A function is certainly undergoing a transformation from a back office function to a strategic function that can empower data-driven decision-making and impacts performance across the enterprise. How do companies empower FP&A leaders to serve as trusted advisors across the enterprise on strategic and operational decisions? Today, you will discover how to assess the level of FP&A analytics maturity at your company, how to help your FP&A function grow up to offer more strategic value, benchmarks for budgeting and forecasting practices, best practices for rolling forecasts and dynamic planning, trends in technology and business partnering, and insights from over 300 FP&A leaders relative to what they need to optimize the value delivered by the FP&A function at their companies. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Careers, cover a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to review our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of our value proposition to you in investing an hour of your valuable time with us today. So quite simply, Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals and finance professionals to own their career success. Our sister company, Treasury Jobs, has a plethora of Treasury job opportunities. Treasury Careers has several Treasury certification resources, Treasury best practices, and of course, we offer complimentary webinars like the one today. Now on to the exciting housekeeping items. The slides are available under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. If you're having issues downloading the handouts, please send me an email and I will get those handouts to you tomorrow. For those of you interested in CTP or FP&A credit, you'll have to remain on for the duration of the webinar and answer all of our polling questions. If you have questions on CTP, FP&A credit, or anything else related to the webinar, please send me an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. I'd love to hear from you today, so I invite you to ask your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to get to all of your questions during our Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. Fear not, if I do not get to your question, I will follow up with you directly in order to address your question. Finally, appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of our webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. I do want to offer another housekeeping item note. We are going to have more polling questions than normal for our webinars, so this is going to be much more of an interactive experience. So I invite you to be on your toes, and I appreciate your consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. So in terms of our learning objectives, our value proposition, we'd like you to be able to understand key drivers of FP&A success in today's world, be able to assess the level of FP&A analytics maturity at your company, and what it takes to reach a leading state. I'd like you to be able to understand key factors for effective driver-based planning, identify inherent barriers of FP&A success at your company, and maybe most importantly, identify specific opportunities to increase the strategic value of the FP&A function at your company. Certainly, if we can accomplish our fifth objective in allowing you to identify opportunities to increase the strategic value of the FP&A function at your company, your time will be very well spent today. So how am I going to accomplish my learning objectives today? Well, first, we're going to take a look at a framework that you can use, which is courtesy of the FP&A International Board to assess your company's FP&A analytics maturity. It can be a very valuable tool, and we'll take some time to go through that. And it really describes three states of analytics maturity, but most importantly, it really shows what it takes to move from one state to the next. So that's incredibly valuable for companies as an assessment tool. So I think it's incredibly important to keep things simple. So this gives us a framework to look at where we're at, where do we want to be, and then what is it going to take to get us there. Next, we'll take a look at some drivers of FP&A success. We'll be looking at some survey results from a very compelling survey from the IMA and James Servin. So it's a great read. I've got a hyperlink to the survey report. And then we'll pivot to talk about driver-based planning, and then we'll talk about rolling forecast best practices. As together, they definitely help companies take FP&A to the next level, and they certainly facilitate business agility. And then we'll take a look at FP&A business partnering, which is really a key to optimizing the value of FP&A at your company. I don't think it really gets enough attention, and we'll offer you another tool courtesy of FP&A Trends, which will allow you to assess the level of FP&A business partnering in your company. Again, you can assess where you're at, where you'd like to be, and what it would take to get there. So oftentimes, you really need to get that FP&A business partnering up to that leading state, and then you can really take on that transformation project. And then we'll take a look at some FP&A challenges and benchmarks. We'll look at survey results from a global FP&A survey, which had over 311 respondents from across the globe. So we'll tie things together, and then we'll offer some closing thoughts, and then we'll get to our Q&A session. So the FP&A Analytics Maturity Model, developed by the FP&A International Board, again, it offers companies a great tool to assess where they're at, where they want to be, and what it will take to get there to empower FP&A to impact performance across the enterprise. If we look at differences across the states of maturity, we can see there are three really key drivers here. And I'm going to warn you, I'm going to ask you a polling question here about where your company falls on this scale shortly. So please pay attention here so we can get some good answers to the polling question. So first, the key I would say is process. So we look at that basic state. So there are 3 higher level states and then five categories below. But we start to look at process, right? No formal process. Then we get to that defined process. And then in that leading state, we get to that integrated planning process. And then if we look at the second key area, which is technology, which has a few more dimensions, it looks at the tools, analytical tools. Over here, we have no planning model and tools. Over here, we have integrated driver-based planning. So part of our discussion will be about driver-based planning, because driver-based planning is certainly something that can help companies move to that leading state. And also married to that in a lot of ways is that rolling forecast, which facilitates that business agility, which leads us to our next key area, which is collaboration. So here in basic, we see no collaboration. We get to minimal, then we get to collaborative planning, and then we get to this real-time collaborative planning, which is really the cat's meow. And then the other thing that I'd like to note is also is a function of the types of analytics that we're using. So we have no analytics, then we start to get descriptive, then we start to get some expertise on how we look backwards, but then we start to look at predictive analytics, and then we get to advanced analytics, which I would say would be prescriptive analytics. So again, I think this is an incredibly valuable tool. This is a slide that I would definitely print out. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some survey results, and they're going to offer us some keys to FP&A success. And then what we'll do is we'll see how these compare and align to our FP&A analytics maturity matrix. So now that I've given you some time to digest the slide, I'm going to go ahead and launch our first polling question. Again, the first of many, so be ready. It's asking you how you would characterize the current level of FP&A analytics maturity at your company. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions today. If you are interested in CTP or FP&A credit, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions today and stay on for the duration of the webinar. And I'm going to remind you several times, we can take your questions in the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave the polling question up for another 5 seconds or so everyone can get their answers in. And then I'm going to go ahead and share the results and then give a little bit of commentary. And then I'm going to also really benchmark these relative to the survey results, which we will take a quick look at a little later. So I'm going to give everyone the 3-second warning. 3, 2, 1. It's basketball season, right? There's the buzzer. So let's go ahead and close the poll. Let's go ahead and share those results. And what we see is that we have 56% of our attendees in the basic or developing category. And then that's pretty much dead on with what we see in our survey results from those 311 FP&A and finance leaders across the globe. I think we were at 55%. So that's, so that's pretty consistent. So this is, again, it's a little bit surprising to me, given all of the attention being paid to FP&A evolution. But again, it really level sets us to where we're at and gives us that reality check. And the good news is this framework, along with other results that we will talk about, will show us what does it take for us to get to the next level. A lot of times after webinars, people will ask me, where do I get started? And again, I like to keep it simple. If you're trying to accomplish a project or make an improvement in a certain area, you need to be able to assess where you're at, where you want to be, and what it's going to take to get you there. It sounds really simple, but again, you'll see throughout the webinar that I like to keep it simple. So thank you very much for everyone in sharing your thoughts with us. And what we'll be doing is I'll be writing a blog, which is going to consolidate some of the polling question results from the webinar and compare those to the survey report. So let's certainly keep an eye out for that. So let's go ahead and hide those survey results, and then let's just take a little bit of a different angle here. So we're going to take a look at survey results from a comprehensive survey delivered by the IMA in collaboration with Larry Servin, and see how they align with the framework of our FP&A analytics maturity model. I've got the hyperlink here down here to the survey results paper. It's a fantastic read, and also Larry Servin has some fantastic blogs around the results. So as a action item from the webinar, I encourage you as one of those action items to read this article. I think it's very compelling. So what do they identify as drivers of success? They do a better job of translating strategy into actionable plans. To me, a big part of that is collaboration. Obviously, we have to have technology, but I think having effective collaboration across the enterprise is really key to that. So a lot of companies struggle with aligning their departmental goals and what they're trying to do up to the strategic objectives of the company, and that requires a great level of collaboration and communication, which is oftentimes facilitated by technology. Best performing companies do a better job of identifying resources needed to deliver projects and meet plan results and get the resources into the budget. So this speaks to the quality of our process, right? I think here what we would see in terms of those three key areas would be process on the leading stage side, that integrated budgeting process, but that a component of that integrated budgeting process is that collaboration, right? Again, sounds simple, keep it simple. At the end of the day, some of these concepts are simple, but they all kind of fit together. And what you'll see throughout is you'll start to identify areas where you can make that impact, make those improvements in process, technology, and collaboration, and really tie those to the value that FP&A offers at your company. And then better understanding of how their operational plans drive financial results. If we look at our FP&A analytics maturity model, we are going to look at the analytics there, being able to build those relationships up there. So that's a function of our technology, but as we'll talk about later, it's also a function of the data that we have. Right data, right time, right tools, and also the right communication of that data as well. Related point below, better job of variance analysis and the story behind the numbers. One of the points to getting to the story behind the numbers is that you have to have the time to do that analysis. So what we saw in our global FP&A survey was that FP&A professionals were spending a lot of time on low value activities. So what we need to do is get our FP&A leaders more time to spend on these strategic activities, interpreting those numbers, getting the story behind those numbers, and obviously a key to that is giving them the ability to get them timely information, but also, as we'll talk about driver-based planning, also understanding what drives results. So in order to tell the story, you need to know what are the drivers of the story? What are the things that are moving the numbers? What are the internal forces? What are the external forces? What are the forces that are out of our control, under our control? And all of these things we can help with if we have that effective FP&A function at our companies. So a few more results here to share. This is, I'll say this again, are the models of agility. I love the word business agility. You have to be able to react almost in real time given those market conditions. And then being able to react is, I think, is a function of being able to have effective scenario modeling. A part of that, I believe, at least related to it, is to be able to do a rolling forecast, which we'll talk about later. But we really need to be able to run those scenarios effectively, efficiently, almost in real time. And then the last 2 points are around building a foundation for accountability, and that speaks to metrics. It speaks to collaboration, but it also speaks to culture as well. And one of the ways that we help create a foundation for accountability, like it or not, is going to be in our ability to effectively collaborate with our human resources area, which we will talk about later when we talk about FP&A business partnering. So let's take a look at what this paper, the IMA paper, tells us. How do we take FP&A to the next level? Do a better job of not only identifying what drives business success, but also developing measure for those drivers. To me, dramatic pause. That sounds to me like effective driver-based planning. Not only identify what driver measures, establish long-term and short-term targets. Again, the metrics around those drivers. The best performing companies develop initiatives and projects to achieve their targets. So that speaks to the alignment and those relationships. And then do a better job of monitoring results and tying them to incentives. So incentivizing the actions of our employees impact performance across the enterprise. So what our employees do, that impacts the value of our company. So that's really at the heart of driver-based planning, which we will talk about. Before we pivot to that topic, I am going to go ahead and launch our next polling question. So I'd like you to share with me how you would characterize your company's understanding of the key drivers of your financial results. So we have limited at best, adequate but in need of improvement, good, it's becoming a key company focus, ideal, this is something that's under constant analysis at your company, and then E is you don't really know at this time. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions during the webinar. Those of you interested in CTP or FP&A credits will need you to answer all of our polling questions. And once again, I will bore you with my comment, but I would love to have your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. In order to be mindful of our time today, as we have quite a few polling questions and we have quite a bit of ground to cover, I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 3 seconds or so. Then we're going to take a quick look at the results, and then we're going to just take a broad brush at driver-based planning. As you all know, driver-based planning is a webinar in and of itself. So let me go ahead and give you the buzzer warning. Again, like basketball season, 3, 2, 1, the buzzer, there we go. Go ahead and close that, and then we'll see where we fall here. And just about what I expected. I'm glad to see that we've got 44% of our companies at good or ideal. So I'm glad to see that. But what you can see is there's plenty of room for improvement there. So again, we'd like to see people go from limited, it may be 1 jump, 2 jumps, but we'd like to get us to the place where it's ideal and where we are identifying those factors, but also we are looking and making sure that they are valid, over time, that those relationships hold over time. And we might look to every year, every quarter, or maybe every year, probably most commonly every year, we want to look at those factors. So again, at a high level, just to give us some context here, again, from the IMA study, you could certainly see that efficient driver-based planning was certainly a key area to take that FP&A to the next level. So at very high level, identify factors that drive company value. Easier said than done. And one of the arts to this is not focusing on too many factors. I think factors would be 4 to 6 would be, from what I've heard from CFOs, ideal. And then the hard part, right? The last two: establish relationships between the KPIs and the value drivers, and then again incentivize actions that impact performance measured by the KPIs, and then that relationship with that company value. So you can see, as you start to throw more variables in here, the more complicated this becomes. So a little more color around, again, taking it to the degree of keeping it simple, identifying and measuring drivers that matter. In order to achieve our strategic objectives, X, Y, Z need to happen. And if A, B, or C happen, our progress will be derailed or accelerated. So we want to get to X, Y, Z. What are the relationships between A, B, C and our strategic objectives? And then we'll also want to look at those relationships and those factors. Some of those could be, could be internal factors, and some of those could be external factors. So again, in identifying the measures that matter, achieve your strategic objectives, X, Y, Z need to happen, and then if A, B, C happen, our progress will be derailed or accelerated. Are these drivers industry specific? Possibly. Company specific? Possibly. They can be company size specific as well, and they can be a function of your company's risk tolerance as well. And then just in terms of getting a little color here around how this actually on a high level might be done, I found this study extremely interesting from the CIMA, looking at the drivers of company value, and the top 5 were very compelling to me. So what we see is customer satisfaction, customer relationship, quality of field, reputation of brand. So we're really looking at customers and our employees, right? And one we might expect to see is quality of business process, but there's obviously more of a non-financial tilt here. So as we start to make this shift, our focus may need to be on how do we manage an impact on non-financial assets. So we might have to think a little bit differently about our traditional financial KPIs. So again, this is also a very interesting read. So to me, it makes sense, and I think we're getting to the point where we're keeping it simple. We want to look at the actions that our employees are taking, employee satisfaction, employee productivity, and then how does that translate into the value that we're offering our customers as measured by customer satisfaction, lifetime value of customers, and things of that nature. So now you can give yourself a little bit of a headache and try and look at some of these, but just some of the KPIs. So they're a little bit different. So one that might be a little bit more familiar: quality of business process. We want to look at data quality, KPI, customer relationship. These might be different than we're used to. Customer experience and satisfaction. And those of you in finance and CFOs, you can impact the customer experience. That starts with how they pay, and then I encourage CFOs to build relationships with customers and not just be a moderator of disputes, which was often the case when I was working in finance. And then again, that customer satisfaction, and then that quality of people. Again, we're going to talk about how to collaborate with HR, employee productivity, talent source pipeline, and then pipeline and retention, and then some people are starting to focus more, which is really harder to quantify, but I think this just gives us kind of the way to develop that relationships, and then just makes the point that maybe you're like, okay, I'm at this ideal state, but it may be time to take a little bit of a mind shift and see if there are some non-financial assets that also have a meaningful impact on your company value. Can you get to that customer satisfaction if you're not using that, or your employee productivity? Is that something you need to take a look at? So just some Dynamic planning success factors. Again, another slide which would be good. Executive support, strategic focus on agility. Again, we talked about agility. One of the things that will help us with our agility is our rolling forecast, which we will pivot to in a few moments. Short planning cycles, again, that's our ability to reforecast. To me, this suggests a rolling forecast. The right technology, again, we need that scenario modeling. We need that collaborative planning. A lot of the, not a lot, but some of the cloud-based FP&A CPM systems and the CRM systems allow you to chat back and forth within the application, send notification. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Really allows us to get a 360 degree view within our FP&A process, but also in terms of our communications with our customers and suppliers, which is where we can also help our colleagues as well. Of course, you want to have buy-in from your business managers who are going to be involved in your planning process. Our goal is to facilitate data, fact-based decision-making. Of course, we want to have intuition, but we want to have data and facts to back up that intuition, fine-tune that intuition, validate that intuition. So there is a way to incorporate that intuition, but we want to make sure that we get to data, that fact-based decision making, and that's going to improve that decision making across the enterprise. And then the commitment to continuous improvement with the alignment of people, process, and systems. Again, people say this all the time, so do I. People, process, technology. So now I'm going to go ahead and tee up our next polling question before we pivot to rolling forecast. So let's go ahead and launch the next polling question, asking you if your company has adopted rolling forecast. We have options of well-established, you're in the process of implementing, no, but you're considering, no plans at this time, or you do not know. So again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today, and I appreciate everyone answering the amount of polling questions that we have today. Again, I'm really trying to facilitate the interactive nature of our webinars, and also as an outcome from the webinars, I'm going to try and develop some benchmarks and statistics to share. So even though we have survey data from 311 people, let's benchmark that against what we're seeing from our audience and see if we can start to make some inferences. So I appreciate your consideration in helping me with that, and hopefully valuable to you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the basketball warning I've got going. 3, 2, 1, the buzzer here. All right, let's go ahead and close that polling question. Then let's go ahead and share. And looks like we've got 54% rolling forecast. That's pretty in line with what we saw from our global survey. I believe we saw 56%. But I will say that I was a little bit surprised to see the number, that it was that high. And I'm glad to see that 21% of you are considering. So those 21, 27, that 48%, let's get them to well established. And then those of you who have no plans at this time, I think it's something that really probably deserves some consideration. And again, there's just a lot of knowledge out there. Of course, we're on our webinar today. There's a lot of white papers from various sources. There's a lot of research out there. There's the ability to connect with your colleagues. So I very much encourage folks on LinkedIn to reach out. The folks that have the same titles, maybe the same industries, they're looking at challenges. So we've already been through this process of rolling forecast. What are your insights? Maybe you use the same systems. So I encourage folks to look at multiple resources to help them when they're making that assessment of whether that rolling forecast makes sense and that business case makes sense to you as well. The next piece will be on rolling forecast. Those of you who are well established, apologize if this will be a little bit of a review to you. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that rolling forecast here. And so we'll just see in your first review, what you're doing is you're updating with the actuals and you're moving the goalpost. So just from a operational stand, we see that just the mechanics of that rolling forecast. So just note, we're talking about a lot of theoretical things and the way that things should be, and please be patient. At the tail part of the webinar, we'll get to the reality and how to address some of these issues. So I appreciate your patience here. So again, that's just some of the rolling forecast. And then I want to go through those of you who are considering and in process, just some great success factors, courtesy of FP&A Trends. Larissa Melnichuk has been so kind as to speak on webinars for me and has spoken to these probably more eloquently than I will. But again, these are just things that you'll see that are consistent, the success factors, rolling forecast, driver-based planning, and and FP&A maturity. So I think it's good to see those alignment. Culture, real quick, as a rolling forecast, it's not a measurement, it's a management tool. So we have to get people on board that there needs to be an investment in the rolling forecast. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes an investment in people, process, and technology. And then in terms of people, we need to have folks with different skills. We'll talk about those skills as well. We need folks that can build models, analytical, good communication skills, and business partners. We'll talk about that as well. And then systems and models. Again, we want this based on advanced analytics. We talked about driver-based planning, and then we want to be careful that we don't have technology that's a black box. I don't think that it necessarily needs to be managed by finance, but I would say finance has to play a big role in that, and we don't want to get to the point where we're leaning on IT as well. And then just the process itself, and where possible, you want to design out bias. Again, data-driven decision making. We want less judgment and more analytics. And you want your projects and changes to be based on clear assumptions that you have, and then you might want to consider restricting adjustments to that forecast. And then I love the design from our colleagues at Maersk. They've been kind enough to speak for us as well on rolling forecasts. The 4 pillars: visibility, agility, control, and simplicity. You have forward-looking for that visibility. Agility, you want early identification and correction. Again, this is a environment of continuous improvement. You want that control, and then you want simplicity, removal of unnecessary details. So again, you want to forecast what matters. You don't want to get in a situation where you are in data overload, which is one of the things that we'll look at a little later in terms of our survey results. We'd like to have an integrated rolling forecast, top down and bottom up. Again, it's both ways, right? Those are 2 ways to do it. We want that hybrid, and we want processes that are harmonized through common drivers and systems, as we talked about earlier. And then of course we'll get a little bit more deeper into collaboration, but some good best practices. Key participants, you want to invest in training them, and you want to implement a participative process through your MODEMS systems as well. So just in terms of some of the benefits that we see, which obviously roll up to improve the value of FP&A: accuracy, business agility, right? Flexibility, decision making, and then improves that alignment with that corporate vision. So what I mentioned earlier, you talked about some of the key success factors, and in my mind, the key pillar, or certainly one of the key pillars, is FP&A business partnering, and this is actually becoming more of a formal area at many companies. And so it's fascinating to me. I partnered with FP&A Trends on a webinar which focused totally on FP&A business partnering. So I'm going to share with you a few of the highlights there, and then my own experience in terms of how to collaborate beyond finance with some specific tactics and how you can actually improve your relationships. So Again, business partnering, the alignment of FP&A function with business operations. You want to acquire business knowledge. Again, we want to influence decision making. We want to shift away from what happened to what should happen, and then how to execute change. So we want to go from that looking back, looking forward to that prescriptive mode, and it's both strategic and operational in focus. And then it requires investments in relationship challenges and unlocking strategic opportunities across the enterprise. And the first point I want to make, stress, I would say, is that the job requires the investment in those relationships across the enterprise. So, characteristics of a good business partner. Again, this may seem like common sense, but it's good to have this, and it's good to have this top of mind, and it's good to have this if you are going to go to the point where you're going to actually have business partner training, which I would suggest we are actually going to get to an assessment tool of business partnership effectiveness, good communication management. You have a curiosity, business acumen, leadership, good interpreter of data, see the big picture and the details, the creativity, and then a personality type that thrives on new ideas and creative thinking rather than just number crunching. So one of the things that we'll talk about a little later is that what would be good to do is to do a skills assessment, of your team. Where does your team fall? So these are the skills that my team needs to deliver to deliver value, to drive our company's strategic objectives. What are the skills that we have? What are the gaps that we have? How do we close the gaps? Do we close them with training, or do we close them through an acquisition of a new member of our team? So now we're going to pivot to our next polling question as we talk about how to collaborate across the enterprise, asking you to identify which of the following is the most important internal partner of yours, customer, outside of finance at your company. And then once we take a quick look at the polling question results, we'll get into some specific tactics to collaborate effectively with different departments across the enterprise based on my own experiences and experiences in moderating CFO roundtables across the country, and also Treasury roundtables across the country as well, and conversations, of course, with FP&A professionals speaking at various conferences across the country the past several years. So I'm going to go ahead and give everyone about 5 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the results. So we'll go ahead and give this the little the 3, 2, 1. Then we'll give you the old buzzer here. So let me go ahead and close that. Let me go ahead and share the results. I asked this question on another webinar, and I was a little surprised at how low HR was. So to me, HR can be a key partner. And in my mind, HR should be more of a key partner. Internal customer, I would say partner, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Sales absolutely makes a lot of sense, of course. We really want to impact the value that we offer our customers. Obviously, sales are driving our financial results, and operations as well. Absolutely fantastic. I guess I could have been more specific on operations, but absolutely critical, especially and I'm from a manufacturing background, so in terms of that manufacturing background as well. And it's great to see, from what I interpret from this, that means operations is very much involved in the FP&A process at your company, and they have that accountability, which is really good to see. So thank you very much for your answers to that question. So again, just some specific tactics to use, not theoretical. These are practical. They work. Sometimes marketing, you got to teach them the language of finance. Learn the language of marketing to have the conversations you need to have. Help facilitate a better understanding of customer and prospect behavior. What we see in CFO research the past 2 or 3 years is that when we ask CFOs what is going to have the biggest impact on our results, one of the top 1 or 2 factors is the effectiveness of the execution of marketing programs. And an area that they're worried about is their lack of understanding of customer and prospects behavior. Also, it'd be good to ensure an analytics guru in marketing. Had one CFO share with me that they had internal internships. So FP&A, they would take an FP&A person, put them in marketing, take that marketing person into FP&A to do that cross training a little bit lower level than what they did at GE, but that's also a good way to facilitate that collaboration. Collaborating with sales. I hope you're already using some of these. You can probably add more. Get more involved in customer relationships throughout the life cycle. Again, for finance, don't just play the role of referee for customer issues. Help them understand how to engage, communicate, and retain the most valuable customers. Sometimes they need help in identifying what those customers are. Facilitate that 360-degree view of each customer. And so make sure they have, let's take ownership of that technology, and we can also help them in assessing the health of that sales pipeline, and then make sure that we are effectively communicating the value that our company offers to our customers. So again, sales was definitely a key partner, and on the base of this, most of you probably do this. At sometimes I would just go over and ask, start a conversation. How are things going? Is there some sort of data or technology that I could give you and your team to help you be more effective? That's a great conversation starter, helps that collaboration, or take it down to the level in terms of your input into our planning, into our forecasting. What is it that I could get you more help in terms of improving the quality of that forecast and the efficiency of the time that your team is spending there? Collaboration with HR, again, I think this is an area which we would do well in finance to spend more time, and FP&A, of course, as well. Teach them the language of finance, FP&A, learn the language of HR, help them define and optimize the employee experience, not only within FP&A, but beyond. And then I talked about this a little earlier. I think companies do well to have a framework to leverage, to assess, adapt, and cultivate the skill sets and performance of their teams. Again, these are metrics. This can be part of your financial planning, the goals that you have for your skill sets, competency tests, things of that nature to develop those skills. Dive a little deeper here, skills that impact performance, FP&A, to give you some more practical tactics to use. What specific skills matter most for success? We're talking about those. How do you assess whether or not your team members have the skills? And then how do you decide whether to train up or bring in those new employees with those skills? And then you can come up with your list of skills that impact performance. These will align with what we have seen earlier from the survey results. Interpersonal skills, communication, the skills that we're seeing, which are even more relevant in today's world, maybe in the past. Of course, communication, analytical abilities, problem solving, and that tech savvy are very much important, but also that passion for learning and embracing change, because we want to have that, facilitate that business agility, which means being able to adapt, being out in front of the technology, being out in front of the best practices as it makes sense to where our company is at. So define the skills you have, and then in order to meet or exceed what you're trying to do, and then you just look at those in terms of people. Who do I need to get on board? What technology do I need? And what are the processes that we need? So I think it was important to take a little bit of a deeper dive there. And we talk about, business partnering. We always talk about it in a theoretical matter, but I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to have conversations with CFOs and finance leaders across the country to share what has worked with them. So in terms of that business partnering, there's actually a model that you can use with a similar labeling of states from the FP&A trend. So you can have, there's 3 different states, and then the characteristics you're looking at is business knowledge, degree of influence, soft skills, and analytics. So again, another cool thing that we can see is that we can assess where we're at, and then what do we need to get there, right? So we have soft skills, where are we at? How do we get from basic to leading state? And something that aligns directly with our FP&A analytics maturity model is our analytics. So modern analytics, what do we have here? Rolling forecast, driver-based planning, advanced BI analytics. So there are many dimensions to the FP&A success. And I think having these even these two assessment models, along with the survey results, can uh, offer great value to just assess where you're at. And then I think I've never really seen anything that really gives companies clear direction on what it is that they need to advance to the next state, and then look at the value that offers on that next state. So now we're going to pivot a little bit to some trends and benchmarks. So we're going to take some look at the results from the FP&A Empowerment, the Evolution of Technology and Trends survey. One of the underlying questions we were looking to answer was, how empowered are FP&A teams to support CFOs in their new world? What I looked at with my partners, Larissa Melnichuk, FP&A Trends, and also James Myers, FP&A Strategy Consulting, the maturity of their analytics solutions, effectiveness and efficiency of planning process, and how companies leveraging technology, and then the internal perceptions relative to the value of FP&A. Just some survey demographics. See, we have a global survey, less than 50% North America, have a good mix. North America, Africa, Middle East, Europe as well, have a good mixture in terms of company size, have 42% of that $1 billion or greater, have a good mix of industries as well, and have a link to that survey report. Also, you'll be able to request a copy of the survey report if these results interest you in our post-webinar survey. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our next polling question, and really goes to data. So obviously, one of the pillars of being able to facilitate better decision making and offer the analytics and construct the metrics is having access to the right data at the right time. So what we did is we were trying to look at the level of maturity that companies have in terms of the data and in terms of the analytical solutions available to them. So let me go ahead and leave the polling question up here for another few seconds or so. I'll give you the 3-second warning. 3, 2, 1, buzzer. Okay, go ahead and share those results really quickly. It's pretty consistent with what we'll see when we take a look at our survey results. In our survey, we had 12% right data, right time. There was a bigger percentage of you who were closer, that 35% right data, not timely, 19% data overload. And so it's good to see that 4% have that data shortage, but not a priority. But obviously, that data is key. But again, if you look at that data and that shortage, you need to make sure that you're focused on the right data. So you want to make sure that you're not trying to measure everything. You can say, I have data, I don't have enough data because I'm trying to measure things that don't really impact. They're not going to roll up to impacting drivers or impacting that company value. So thank you very much for answering that polling question. So again, what we have seen, at least from our survey respondents, is that there is a data shortage, and again, only 12% reported data nirvana, struggle with availability and quality. Only 12% have access to the right data in a timely manner. From our survey, only 15% have that access. So I would say that we're consistent in that, even though we have this great talk about big data all the time, there is still a shortage of that data. But also related to that, obviously, is the ability to access that data in a timely manner. And related to that, obviously, is to analyze, interpret that data, and get that data in whatever form it is to our decision makers at the right time. So let's go. So the other thing that we looked at was companies reporting and analytics tools. So let's go ahead and get your take on where your company is at in terms of how modern your company's reporting and analytics tools are, because that's certainly going to determine the value that FP&A offers, your ability to do that scenario analysis, turn that data around, interpret that data, do those analytics change that mindset from the ability to looking backward to looking forward and make some prescriptive actions. So let me go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 3 seconds or so, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the results, and then we'll take a peek and see what those look like compared to what we were seeing in our survey results. Go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing 27% very basic Excel, a little higher than what we saw in our survey. Basic ERP module a little bit higher. Intermediate, homegrown. So what we're seeing from our audience and compared to the survey is a lot more of you are quite a bit more, a little bit more of you are in the advanced cloud-based solution. So a few notable differences there. So let's go ahead and take a look at those differences in detail. So what we'll see, we saw the very basic Excel, 27 to 18. The basic ERP was a little bit higher. The intermediate homegrown was a little bit higher in our survey than our audience, and then we had 18%. We didn't have anyone here up in that 2%. And then related to that technological immaturity is the ease of scenario analysis. This result I found very surprising. So only 10% found it somewhat easy or very easy to perform scenario analysis. So that's really an inhibiting factor to business agility, and not having the ability to do that to me is a sign of technological immaturity. So we really need the right tools, and incorporating in the tools is that functionality to do that scenario analysis in order to help unlock the strategic value of FP&A. So we also wanted to see what other inherent barriers may be holding companies back. We looked at the value perceptions, and 27% of respondents conveyed that their companies do not view FP&A as an area of strategic investment. It's often the case that we need investment in that area, so FP&A professionals would do well to work on that, communicating the value better. 38% said it was reported as difficult to justify versus short-term investments in sales or marketing. Again, it's a perception of FP&A. And then this one is a little concerning. 55% conveyed their companies don't think FP&A delivers high strategic value. So some of the things that we need to do is to communicate the value that FP&A can bring, assess where it is now, and obviously where it could be, some of the inhibiting factors, and then what is the value that we could deliver if we had the tools that we need. Taking things up here, from those barriers that are really part of determining the FP&A analytics and maturity, as we studied earlier. Over half companies, or 55%, are in a basic state. 43% to predict future results, 28% to prescribe what action should be done, and only 41% report that most of their decisions are based on data. So we can see that in terms of the evolution of what we expected, at least in our survey population, it wasn't quite as far along, as we would have liked to have seen. However, it was clear that from the other survey results, there were definitely the needs were, in terms of which you can probably figure out from the presentation, their needs were most identified, concentrated in technology and that accountability, and increasing that collaboration. So just to go ahead and offer some closing thoughts. FP&A success is driven by business partnering, the right data, the right systems and process that facilitate business agility. Companies would do well to assess where they stand in terms of analytics and business partnering, leveraging those assessment tools that can help your company define a path to optimizing the value delivered by FP&A. FP&A teams in general need to do a better job at selling the value they provide to ensure continued investment. The business culture needs to be amenable to change. At many companies, the FP&A infrastructure needs to be transformed investments in people, innovative solutions and systems, and improvement in planning and analytics all still need to be addressed. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for your questions. So again, I can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. First of all, there appears to be an issue with the link to the survey handout, so definitely encourage you to send me an email and I will get those handouts to you. As far as requesting a copy of the survey results, you'll have the opportunity to do that at the end of the webinar when we launch that post webinar survey that we have. So there are some questions around technology. So where they're asking, so I mentioned that you don't really want a black box, and some people are saying the solutions out there are a little bit in terms of a black box, and I would say that just depends on really what you are looking to do. And in some cases, what you will see is that in some of the middle solutions in terms of functionality, you can tell that the people that design these systems were actually those that worked in FP&A and finance. So I would say that's I would say that's a little bit too harsh. And I also know that many of the solution providers are absolutely collaborative in terms of the features that they offer. And so in some sense, it's a matter of you deciding what is it that you need to do. How complicated do you need to get? Obviously, on a theoretical level, you want to be to that transformative state. But in terms of your company, where you're at and where you're going, does that cost benefit analysis really justify that on a short-term and a long-term basis? Another question is around making that business case. So how to make that business case. So again, depends. Some of it depends on the scope of what you're looking to do. You want to invest in that solution. Okay, we want to look at what are the challenges that we currently face. How does this solution address the challenges? What are the benefits that we can realize in terms of improved productivity across the enterprise, cost savings, and then better in working capital management. So those are just a few points that I want to make, is that in general, folks don't focus enough on their constituency. So make sure your business case is not only focused on those who you need to get the money from, but those to whom you need to be engaged in your project. So in order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and formally close the Q&A session. We have one more polling question here, which is asking you to share with us if you had one wish relative to FP&A, what would that wish be? I think this question is pretty compelling. I like to put this question in the surveys that I helped develop. I'm going to go ahead and leave this polling question up for another 10 seconds or so. So as I leave the polling question up, I would like to once again thank our webinar partner, Centage. We appreciate their commitment to thought leadership, which is also evident in the great content and resources they offer, of which you can review by visiting the Centage website. And finally, I would like to thank you, our audience, for all of your support in 2017. In addition to your valuable time today, please let us know what we can do better in 2018. Happy holidays, everyone, and make the rest of your day great.